Hello, everyone. Just want to sincerely thank everyone here for taking time out of your busy schedules to, learn a little bit more about Onshape and what it has to offer. Here at EAC, we are a leading platinum partner of PTC, bringing product development solutions to people like you and really just improving team collaboration on designs, data management, and helping get products to market quicker. And for today's webinar of Onshape, we'll have one of our technical account managers, Bill Schlund, who will be taking you through Onshape's simultaneous sheet metal capability. With that said, though, I will pass things off to Bill.
Thanks, Ryan. Hello, everybody. I am Bill Schlund, and I'll be going through Onshape simultaneous sheet metal with you today. First of all, though, I'd like to go through a couple of PowerPoint slides, just to kind of set a baseline of knowledge and really how Onshape is different than probably what you're used to seeing. So what I want to start talking about is designers, engineers, people who create products. And we have a representation of them up here. But as a designer and engineer, you want to be able to do things quickly. You want to be able to innovate. You want to be efficient in what you do. Everything that we're going to put below this line are things that keep people from obtaining those three goals. And the first thing you'll say is, well, this is the way things are. But it doesn't have to be that way. First of all, we start off, we load software, right? So we load either software on our laptops, on our desktops, maybe on a server, but we have the software loaded. And then we can also think about, we might have some network drives, VPN, FTP servers, maybe a PDM system, things like that. But once we got that infrastructure set, we're ready to go. We can start creating products. So we go and create a variety of different types of files. And then we want to start placing those, exchanging those with one another, maybe with our vendors or partners, or also just collaborating between them. So we can do that in a number of different ways. Email, Dropbox, we can get a little bit more sophisticated and use file servers. But basically, we're just taking copies of what we made and placing those in those different ways of extending out that information to other people. And the thing is that if we're dealing with a file server, one of the things I have to think about is if I'm pulling something from there, is that the latest version? Or if I'm pushing information onto the file server, I'm overwriting anybody's work. So we might get a little bit more sophisticated and get a PDM system. At least then I know I'm getting the latest information. But again, all that does is shuffle copies around, right? If you pull something out of your PDM system, you check it out, you're basically just checking out a copy of it. You make some changes, you check it back in. Lots and lots of files, lots of things to manage. And then we could even say, well, I want a partial cloud solution. And we can put some of our files up in the cloud, but that doesn't do anything for you. It's still, you're putting copies in the cloud and pushing them around. So the whole thing with Onshape is it runs totally different than this. So this is the way it's been for, since the mid 80s. This is the way things as CAD has been. Let's take a look at this from the standpoint of the Onshape world. Onshape is really a unified cloud solution. And what I mean by that is all the information, all the tools that you use, everything is created and is stored in the cloud. So we have, CAD capabilities, we have data management capabilities, certainly we have security, variety of different types of apps, workflows are managed through there, lots of things are built into Onshape. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of these things that we see here. The first I'm going to say is talk about the CAD portion of it. So it's a modern CAD product, it's parametric in nature. It also uses multi-part or multi-body modeling, so you can take advantage of that type of approach should you choose to. It has sheet metal capabilities, and that's probably why you're listening here today. And we can also create custom features built into the software. If there's a feature there that we want and that isn't there, we can make it ourselves and then use that. And the next thing I also want to highlight is its data management capabilities. From that, everything that we create, every step, every command we use is preserved, and we can go back to that at any point that we want. We can officially name different points in time as a version. We can branch out and go in a different direction, different design philosophy or approach. And if we do like that design, maybe later on, we can merge it back into the original, or we could keep it separate. We can also compare any 2 points in time, either graphically or feature by feature. And finally, along with the data management, well, we also need a workflow. So we need a way to get information out the door. And so what is built into Onshape is an automatic release management system. Basically, everything we create is in progress, and then we can send that to a person or multiple people or teams of people, and for it to be reviewed and then either be approved or rejected. So with that, that's a little bit of an overview of Onshape, but let's kind of start working with the software itself. So when you log in to Onshape, this is basically your home page, and it's showing up here parts that I've recently been working with. Down here are different folders that either I've created or other people have given me access to. Along the top here, let's take a look at a couple things real quickly. We also have an app store, so if we wanted to get additional functionality that isn't built in Onshape, FEA, creating NC tool paths or maybe realistic rendering, things like that, we can go to the App Store and get that. There's a Learning Center. This is really important. This is how I learned the software. There's over 100 different tips and techniques and movies and webinars, all for free, that I can watch, you can watch, to learn to use the software. There's also paid classes if you wanted to go that route as well. And you can see as you log in, you have a user account, basically. And if we take a look at that real quickly, here's my account. I just have it set up. If I'm going to create something from scratch, it's going to be in inches. I'm going to use pounds, but I could change that at any time that I want. We realize that people who are using Onshape, that start to use it, come from other CAD systems. So depending on what CAD system you come from, it changes the mouse behavior to replicate the CAD system you're coming from. Again, helps you learn things a little bit easier and quicker. And then there's also the capability of this pop-up toolbar. So right at my mouse tip, I can hit a button and my frequently used commands are right there, so I don't have to move to the top or the right side of the screen to get at things. My eyes don't have to move. It just helps make it less fatiguing if you're working on the system for a long time. And after that, we can also talk about a company. If we have multiple people that are using Onshape, we could consider that a company. There's different people. This is my company that I work with, the different people that use it. There's also this concept of teams. We're dividing people up into different groups: engineers, managers, marketing people. We can create our own team, right? It's all user defined, but who do you want to put in teams? And then you can apply things to different teams. It could be rights, it could be a release. When something gets released, it gets released or reviewed by these different teams. A lot of different things we could do with that. I also mentioned a release system, release management. So this is that representation of the workflow for that. And then there's also an automatic part numbering system. So depending on if I have parts or assemblies or files or whatever, how many characters do I want in my automatic numbering? And then here's a preview of what that would work or look like. So let's take a look at Onshape here. I'm going to start working with a product, but to find a product, I was mentioning more along the lines of the data management system, I can come over here and search, and I can search for the type of file that I'm looking for. I could search for what state is it in, is it released, is it obsolete, things like that. So just as you'd see in any data management system, all the filtering capabilities are there so you can find the right data right away. So let's take a look at our kind of theme part here I'm going to be working with. And the first thing you look at is, that's not a sheet metal part. But I put this geometry out here initially to give us that starting point. There's 3 different ways we create sheet metal geometry. And I'll go through 2 of the 3. I'll explain all 3 to you though. Right now I just have this piece of geometry here. It's just a block with a little chamfer on the side. We want to convert this to a sheet metal component. So here's the basic commands for creating geometry, parametric geometry. All along here: extrudes, revolves, chamfers, rounds, all of those things. Then there's direct editing or non-parametric changes that we can do here. And there's some more advanced type features along here. And then here we have sheet metal and the different commands for that. But you'll notice that everything you need is right along the top here. It's very easy to get at anything or any command that you might want. So let's start with the sheet metal. There's 3 ways to create sheet metal geometry. We can convert a solid, which I'm going to do in a second. We can extrude out. We can pick some edges and extrude them out and thicken those. That will give us some sheet metal geometry. And we can actually pick some faces or surfaces and thicken those and create a sheet metal component that way. So let's do the convert solid. So this is the solid I want to convert. And then it says, well, first of all, let's look at the way it does this. This is a little bit different. It takes and puts sheet metal faces on each one of the faces of my solid part. Right now it's on the outside of the solid part. So it's like the internal dimensions are the ones that I want. If I wanted to flip that, and really I'm building the outer one, I just say flip, and now the outside is the boundary of which these are placed. Now, the next thing that we do is, we have all these plates on here. I'm going to pick some to remove because we're going to make a cover here. So I'm going to say remove this face and remove the bottom face. So now we have kind of an open area. And the next thing is all these separate faces. Where do we want our bends to be? So I could say, let's select some edges for bends. I just say, I'll pick this edge and this edge and this edge and maybe that edge. So now I've created a sheet metal part. Also, one of the things is I can control what type of relief I have. Here I have round relief. I could have rectangular relief, rip relief, all those types of things. At the very beginning, Anthony referred to this as simultaneous sheet metal. This is why it's called that. I'm going to click right here. And what we see is the flattened version of our part. You notice if I pick on a face, it highlights it in both there. If I pick on an edge, if I pick on maybe this edge here, it highlights it over on the geometry, and also it highlights it up here along our table. So the table is showing us where we have bends. We can see as I mouse over each one of those, they're highlighting in both other windows. And then also where I have rips. So the way I have this formed right now, it's not really kind of the way that I would really want it to be. I could come over here and pick on this edge over here. I could pick on it over maybe on this side. But you notice when I do, it highlights it over here in the table, also down here in the flat version. And instead of me putting a bend there, I'm going to say, let's change this. And our particular bend that we have, and let's grab this guy. I'm going to say change it to a rip. So instead of bending it, let's rip it. And watch what happens down below. It takes that piece and moves it off. So now we have, these are all connected by bends. This is separate. So really what I want to do is add a bend. So I could go over here to this rip that I have originally over here, and I could say, let's change that to a bend. And what it does is it reconnects everything up again. So no matter which window is easier for me to work with, I can do it. They all interact with one another, hence simultaneous sheet metal. One of the things that we could do as well is I could come over here in a corner, kind of take a look at this corner here. It's highlighting it here, it's highlighting it there. And I could say, maybe I want to have them overlap. So I could say, does the top overlap over the side or the side overlap over the top? And I could do that to that particular side. I could come over, maybe pick on this side and say, I want that to be the same. And we overlap that one as well. So we can do all kinds of control, again, with any one of these views that we have here. One of the nice things with the software as well is I can just right mouse button and say, let's create a drawing of this flattened pattern. Or I could export this out right away as DXF or DWG to the manufacturing guys. But let's go and create a drawing. So we'll put it on a C-size piece of paper. So it automatically takes our flat pattern that we were looking at and puts it on a C-size piece of paper. And there's different things that we can do when we have drawings that can automatically place views and things like that. In this particular case, I'm going to say, let's make this a little bit bigger. And we'll place it right here. So now we have the flat pattern placed out here. One of the things I could do as well is I could say, let's do some ordinate dimensioning, and we'll say, pick on a bottom edge maybe and have our 0, 0 be over here, and then just simply go and pick different edges to do our ordinate dimensioning to. Oh, one right at the top here too. So now I have a start on the drawing. Obviously I can put in a lot more information to this. There's all kinds of different types of tables we could put in. I could put in a revision block or something like that. But let's go back to our part studio. So this is a part studio, and it's not a file, but it's actually a holder of information. So I can take a look at our part studio here. What I have here is I have the part we've been working on. I have the ability to do an assembly, or I have an assembly here. And then I also have some other information, maybe a previous part that we've created here. I also have some requirements for this particular product that we're working on. So all the information I need to develop this product is right here stored in my part studio. So with this, we have a good start on this particular part. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's use the pop-up menu, make a plane, maybe an inch above there. And then we can start sketching on this plane. So I'm going to say, let's just sketch on that plane and kind of look at it this way. So I'm going to create a second component is basically where I'm going with this. I'll say, let's just make a rectangle. So this is our second component. Now, one of the things I want to do is have this is going to be a shelf, so I want it to fit inside the rest of this enclosure that I've created. So I could say, let's move that face over to here. Let's move this one over to there. And so I'm just kind of stretching this guy out so he fits inside of our geometry that we have here. So now we have a sketch. And now we can use the second mode that I was referring to is a thicken. So I'm just going to come over to our sheet metal again. And this time I'm going to say, oh, let's go. We're going to say, let's thicken. And we're going to pick on our sketch. So here it's created the sketch. It's extruding it or making the thickness above it. I'm going to say really that 1 inch above is the top of this shelf that I wanted. So I'm just going to move it down there. And again, we can control the thickness and the bend radius and all those types of information about this. So now I have two parts, two sheet metal parts. Technically, this is not an assembly. It's a multi-body part. So there are, two bodies here. But if I wanted to create an assembly, I could just go over here and say, let's insert this information into our assembly. I can insert the parts individually, or I could just say, let's just put the part studio in here and automatically place that. So now we do have two parts, as you can see, part 1, part 2, and we could also come over here, take a look at a bill of material. We can see the two components, their names, what state they're in. I might want to say, let's change this column, move it over a little bit. I can also add a variety of other kind of columns. This information is either pulled from the parts that are there, or if we type information into the bill of material, it pushes it into the parts. So it's a bidirectional link between the parts and the bill of material. In fact, this bill of material is the exact same one you would see in a drawing if I was to make an assembly drawing for this particular component. So let's go back to our part studio. One of the things that I want to do, and let's kind of move this window to the side, is I want to ask for some help. I need somebody to kind of work on this part while I'm working on it, right? I'm going to do some stuff, but we can get things done faster if two people are working. So I'm going to go over and take maybe the second part over here, and I'm going to add a comment to it. And the comment I'm going to say is, I'm going to send this to someone in my company. So I'll search for Nick, right? And I'll send it to, we have a couple of Nicks, but I'll send it to this guy and just say, can you help with this? And I'm going to assign it to Nick, right? So he's actually going to have an email come to him saying, Bill wants you to help him with this. And it's actually part of his to-do list. I'm going to say assign this. He goes, message right here says, you are now going to share this with Nick, because up until now, no one has access to this. I'll say, okay. So this is what's starting to set Onshape apart from anything else, is that we can do real-time collaboration. So Nick gets an email. My phone just vibrated. And it can see that he gets a link. He clicks that. Bill wants to collaborate with you. He logs in. Here is that assignment, right? His action items. And here's that, Nick, can you help with this? He can select on it. He can see that here. And he can select on it. And that brings him into my part that I'm working on right here. And so he sees it on his screen. So I'm going to take my screen. Let's move Nick down a little bit. I'm going to move just so we can have them kind of both on the same thing here. So, we're looking at the exact same part. And Nick can see over on his screen, there's a comment right there, and he puts his mouse over it, it says, can you help? And he can see that it's with this part. Or I could have put it exactly on the face of this part. One of the things that we can do as well in a communication tool is I can control this so that when I zoom in, Nick sees exactly what I see. So he is kind of a slave to me right now. And this will help me better explain, maybe I need to have you figure out how we can fit this shelf and fasten it into our cover. And then Nick can just say, okay, I understand that. I can work with that. And he can send me back a message, sure, I can help you out. So what I'm going to do, since we're going to start making some changes here, everything that we've done so far has been saved. But I'm going to say, let's create a new version, and we'll just call it like before Nick. I'll say save this version. So if we look in the history of what we've done, we started out here early this morning or earlier today, and here are all the commands that I've used so far, right, to create the cover and the shelf that we have there. And then here's the before Nick. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to say, let's branch off. And I'm going to create one, and we could just call this like our ECN 123 and put in a description. But basically, this is modifying the shelf to fasten it to the cover. So now I've created this branch in the history tree. I'm going to still continue to work with the main branch here, but I want Nick to work with this one. And whatever he does to the shelf will be fine, right? And I'll look at it. If I want to use it, I'll use it. If not, I'll just keep working on my stuff. So this is how we can kind of distribute information to multiple people. Now at this point, Nick is just in kind of a view mode. You notice he doesn't have the same commands, the same features that I do. He just has viewing capabilities. And so he's going to say, well, if you want me to help, give me some rights, would you? So I'm just going to come over and say, let's go in and change Nick's rights. And instead of just viewing, we're going to say he can edit this as well. And I've updated his capabilities. All he has to do is just refresh his web browser. And that's really the only thing you need to access Onshape is a web browser. Everything that we've done so far today is all been in the cloud. The geometry we're creating is in the cloud. All the features, all the software we're using is in the cloud. So now Nick has capabilities. He has the same commands that I have. And he's going to go over to this tree, and he's going to start working on this part of it. He's going to start working on the shelf. I'm going to do my own thing. So I'm going to kind of move his over here a little bit so that we can start to work with this. The first thing I think he's going to do is say, well, let's work on this, and we want to put some tabs on it, because his idea is maybe put some tabs on the side to fit in, so we don't have to use bolts or anything, or screws or anything along those lines. So he's going to say, let's just start sketching on this top part, and we can just start kind of sketching out the tabs that we want to create. So one of the things that we can do is just sketch out maybe something like this. This could be our first tab, and we'll maybe make it 4 inches by, I don't know, like the thickness was maybe 1/8. And then we also, let's see, let's make it symmetric about the center here. We'll say this guy and this guy. So that centers it along the center here. So that's our first tab. He can then easily go in and say, let's make a second tab, maybe over here. Same thing, we'll maybe make that tab 4 inches and another 1/8 of an inch. And then let's put one on the other side. So we'll say mirror about here, grab all this stuff in the box and flips it over. So now I've got 3 tabs all set up to be used. So finishing my sketch, and again, sketches don't have to be fully constrained using Onshape, which is kind of nice. But let's take a look at this. We've got our 3 tabs. He can go over to sheet metal and say, let's create a tab. And he can pick on the 3 faces that he wants to create the tab with. And as soon as you pick those, it automatically adds some thickness. Now there's some other things here with the tab. There's a clearance. And it's like, well, why do you have a clearance? Well, this one is actually fitting in to another component. So what I can do is come over here and say, I want these tabs to cut holes in this face, and this face, and this face. And if we kind of zoom in, and let's kind of finish up our tab here, we can see that's left a little bit of clearance there, and it's put the tabs in automatically for us. Now again, this is what Nick has been doing. I'm back here doing my stuff. And because he has a different variation or a branch that I do, I can create my own geometry here where I'm going to start doing some things. So I'm going to say, let's sketch on this top face again. And in this case, Maybe I want to do some tabs as well. So I'm going to say, let's create an arc, maybe right here, start there, go around to there, maybe back to there. And we'll make it maybe 1 inch. So this will be the tab that I want to put in. So finishing that, I go to my command and say, let's put in a tab. You notice we have flanges, we have hems. We can control the joints, which is basically, do you want them to overlap, which we were doing before using the table. We can modify the corners and the bend release and things like that. But I'm going to say, let's make a tab with this guy. And it automatically adds it onto our part. And then I can come over here and say, let's go over and add it on to this guy. Oh, not that guy. Onto this guy as well. There. So now we've got 2 tabs. So one on one part, one on the other. So I can basically transfer tabs between parts, saving me time. So now I've got my version. Nick has his version. And I can come over here and take a look at things. By looking at his representation in the history tree, I can say, yeah, that looks good. So here, you notice I've been continuing on. I'm just going to go in and say, I want to merge in his information. So I'm just going to come in and say, well, let's pick on this. And we'll say, merge this in with mine. In doing that, we'll see, even though we've been working on the same parts, it automatically merges in his work into mine. And you notice now everything is now combined. And of course, if we go back and take a look at the drawing, all of that has been updated as well. So the thing is, and updating is, we can control when we update drawings, should we have a really complicated one. But here we can see that the tabs have automatically been added that I've been creating. One last thing, and this happens all the time, last minute changes. So I have, let's say, a application engineer on the customer site working with the customer, and he's talking with the customer and he says, oh, they have a last minute change they want to make. He's calling me on his cell phone. So I'm going to say, well, what is it? And just a second here. He says, well, they want to start adding some flanges on this. And I'll say, okay, let's kind of share my screen with you. And I'll say, well, what exactly do you mean? And I could say, let's take a look at our part.
Is this is real time on your phone, right? Right, Bill?
Yes, it is. Yep, this is real time. So I'm connecting this up. All he has to do is select on this. And again, what I'm looking for is to have him give me an information a little bit more about these flanges. And so while he's talking to me on his cell phone, he can start up Onshape and he can start zooming in, zooming out just with your fingers. You move your fingers farther apart, closer together, you're zooming in and zooming out on your part. Thing is, he wants to add flanges, and I'm saying, well, what kind of flanges where? He's got capability right here to do that. So we can say, let's add some flanges on here. Let's add one here and there on that edge. And we can see that they've been added on the phone here, and he can say, complete that command. So he's been adding the flanges for us. I'm going to move this around, or added a flange. And we can come back over here for fastening. We can see that it's been updated here. And if we go back to our drawing, we can see that the flange has been added when we hit the update button. You can see that it's been added right there. So the thing is that people can access Onshape just using their phone. In fact, 1 out of 6 people access Onshape with their phone, which was really surprising for me to hear that. But it's because it's so easy to collaborate. Let's say I get a request to review something or to approve it Or in this case, I want to show somebody the idea that the customer had last minute. I can do that really, really easily. Everybody sees this. We're all on the same page. But with that, that kind of brings me to a close of what I wanted to cover here today, talking about simultaneous sheet metal. But it's simultaneous a lot of stuff, right? Simultaneous people all working on the same thing at the same time using simultaneous sheet metal.